Hello, CSW parents. I'm Josh Dyson, Classical School Wichita Headmaster, and I'm here with our upper school principal, Grant Bickell.
Hey, how's it going today?
Great, how are you?
I'm doing pretty okay today.
Excellent. What are we talking about today, and what title do we give for this podcast?
Today we're going to be talking about grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And, so often in our community, these words are sort of thrown around, and I think a lot of people have an idea of what they mean. But we'd love to talk a little bit more about what they actually mean and how we use them sort of internally. So they're encapsulated in this larger thing called the liberal arts. So Josh, what are the liberal arts?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've all heard of the liberal arts. There's liberal arts colleges, there's programs and all these things. And in some ways, it's almost come to mean, or become very meaningless, that people generally think it has something to do with history or literature or something like that. But in the medieval world, there's a very specific understanding of what the liberal arts are, and they came up with 7 liberal arts. And those were broken into 2 categories, and one they called the Trivium, which is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, is how we've codified those, and we're going to talk about those a little bit today. And then there's another set that's called the Quadrivium, right? And if you're familiar with those words like tri, of course, means 3, so grammar, logic, and rhetoric is 3, and then quad means 4, so there's 4 of those. And the vium part of both of them means way. So the trivium is the 3 ways. Quadrivium is the 4 ways. The quadrivium is geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and music, which would be considered the maths.
Yeah, so the trivium deals a little bit more with word, and quadrivium deals more with number and how number interacts in different ways.
Absolutely.
So there's 7 of them. They have had long-standing tradition, but why are we focused in sort of as a school on the art, and what is a liberal art? What does it do for us?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that it took me a long time as I was wrestling with why is it called an art? And when we think about what an art is, Thomas Aquinas described it as the tools by which knowledge is fashioned. St. Augustine said, an art arises when imitation joins reason.
Wow.
Is he's talking about? He's talking about like a songbird, that of course, they have imitation and they can sing beautifully. And is that an art? And he's saying, well, that's not an art because they're only imitating. So the goal, as we're thinking about, this art arising, is not just, that you're imitating something, but you're actually learning with a reason how to use it. So art really is a tool or a skill that these students are learning. It's not just knowledge. It's not just regurgitating things. There are things, of course, that are important to memorize, but it's training them up on how to do something, and particularly in their intellect, how to do those things.
Yeah, and so the liberal arts tradition sort of stood in contrast to the common arts, which or the servile arts back then, which would have been masonry, woodworking, those kind of things that were just more a trade. And so the liberal arts serve to make they're the free arts, the ones that are the ones of thought. And for the trivium, it's all around language. So how if we're moving from imitators to reasoning in grammar, logic, and rhetoric, it seems like, man, that's a pretty hefty path. What does that look like at CSW?
Yeah, no, that's great. It's a great question, and as one we're thinking about as we look at the portrait of a graduate and the mission of our school. I love that you brought up the common arts, and sometimes people ask, does that mean that they're lesser, those kind of things, and they're really not. They're so important for the education of a whole person as humans, right? These are vital to us being formed as humans. When we're talking about the liberal arts, we're just specifically talking about an intellectual side of things. It doesn't mean it's superior. It's largely what we're doing at school is mostly of the mind. We do a lot of things of the body as well, and they do those things outside in the home as well. So as we imagine how we've constructed our curriculum from kindergarten through 12th grade, a lot of it does focus in on how do we intentionally build the skills of thinking, and you got to start the very basic framework or tools for that. and then the tools can become more advanced over the course of time.
So it seems like CSW has a particular focus on the trivium and not on the quadrivium. At least that's the terms I hear thrown around are about the trivium and not the quadrivium. Why are we throwing that term around so much? Why do we find that particularly useful?
Yeah, no, it's great. And as you brought up earlier, and just to come back to this real quick, as a reminder, the trivium is about language, and the quadrivium is about the maths. Now, it's not as cut and dry as just saying, hey, this is literature, English over here, for trivium, and this is, geometry and calculus over here for quadrivium. It is more nuanced than that. There's actually more overlap than that. But the intention we have of giving the attention to the trivium is that for us as humans, and the unique thing we have as humans is this ability to reason, and especially to reason with language, right? This is a very Christian idea, right? We think about, the beginning of John, the beginning was the Word, right? That identification even with, the Son of God so closely and the creation itself, right? Being spoken into being, the Scripture being words. Language is so vital to who we are and our understanding and growth. And you really can't do, even if you think about the maths, you can't learn the maths without language.
Yeah.
Right? It's essential for us to put the framework of language in place. And that essentially frees the student to be able to learn whatever they want to learn, right? Because they have the basic building blocks of just how to communicate and understand others and what their intentions are, and that opens the whole world of possibility.
I feel like there's some Lewis quote, and I'm totally going to botch it, so send me the quote if you know it exactly, but something to the effect of, don't give me someone who knows a bunch of things, give me a Latinist and I'll teach them geometry, I'll teach them these other things. And so it's not that we don't have a great math program, right? It's not that we're ignoring mathematics, but if you walk into our math classrooms, you're probably going to see, if you walk in any of them, the students talking quite a bit about why they did the problem that way. And there's quite a bit of reasoning that goes on with that, different than maybe somebody doing a deep dive on arithmetic and getting really down into how number works and why that number in particular works that way. So for us, we have the 3 stages that everyone sort of knows. We call grammar K to 6, we call logic 7 and 8, and we call rhetoric 9 through 12. It's a little more nuanced than that, though, with how it works in the idea of the liberal arts. It's not stages necessarily that now my kid is out of the grammar stage, because they'll still be doing some logic things, or some grammar things. But what are grammar, logic, and rhetoric?
Yeah, that's great. So much of what we think of is the stages. What we've identified as comes heavily from Dorothy Sayers and the Lost Tools of Learning that all of our faculty read, and really is a great piece and so helpful. Not necessarily how they thought about things historically in the medieval world or ancient world, but what it does by having these stages is it helps to, in shorthand, so to speak, recognize, all right, younger students are going to be more focused on grammar kind of things. They can do some logic, they can do some rhetoric. I mean, my daughter's doing a book talk this week. What are they doing? They're doing rhetoric is what they're doing. So there actually is a lot of building that in at the youngest stages, but primarily they're doing grammar. As they get a little older, primarily they're doing logic, still doing grammar to your point, still doing rhetoric. And then in the later stages, focus does become very heavily on the rhetoric side of things.
So the grammar stage is focused heavily on reading, listening, and cultivating memory. This is why we have a large number of rote memorization things that they're doing. We want them to experience and to recite some of the greatest passages of all time. Logic, based on sort of that interpretation, exegesis, debate, hermeneutics. And it's really a lot about learning to ask the right questions.
Yeah, that's
rhetoric. Right. What would you say rhetoric is then?
Yeah, there's a great kind of summary of those earlier points for it. And think about the grammar side. They're building these things. Sometimes it is by rote memory, but you're hoping to build on those things later on, right? Like store these things in your heart, and later on in the logic stage, be able to help you make the connections. And then the rhetoric stage, one of the things that Clark and Jane, who wrote a book that we read called the Liberal Arts Tradition. they talk about rhetoric as being the power of seeing all available options in any given situation. So to be able to look at here's the situation before us, and what is the different, whether it's a mode of persuasion or it's how to interpret something. And I love that like the idea of the power of seeing is not just me talking at someone. It's as important that I'm able to listen and interpret well. I mean, writing and speaking well persuasively is really essential to rhetoric. But not only that, but it's doing so with responsibly. And virtuously. Everyone talks. I mean, we see this in politics all the time. You don't have to be classically educated to talk or even to be persuasive.
Right.
But there's a call upon those who are classically educated to not only be able to persuade, but to do so in a way that honors the Lord.
That's right. Quintilian says that rhetoric is found fully and most truly in the good man speaking well. And so that's what we hope for you guys. Thanks for listening today.
Awesome. Thanks.